We're running a program. Various errors could occur, and we call them in Python, we call them exceptions. Let's see an example. So if I have, let's say I have a string, and that string is hello, and let's say by accident I want to convert this string to an integer value, which is not possible. So if I say int s, it's going to give me an error message. So in Python, again, we call the errors that occur exceptions. In Python, exceptions can be caught and handled by the program to either correct the error and continue the execution or terminate the program gracefully. So instead of showing a red message, you can end it gracefully, similar to what I did for the next lab that we have for lab 6. So in lab 6, even though the functions are not written, your program does not show you error messages for instance, this function does not exist. It gracefully ends the program and gives you some information about what is happening. So simply, an exception is a value or an object that is raised, signaling that an unexpected or exceptional situation has occurred. In Python, we have a set of predefined set of exceptions, and we call them a standard exception. For example, in our previous example, the exception that we got was value error. Here are some examples of different predefined exceptions in Python, and the last example we saw was value error. Another common error that we seen so far is name error, when you are trying to use a name, a variable name that doesn't exist. Okay, let's create something like that. Let's say I want to print variable var that doesn't exist yet. All right, so you get name error or value error, or here name error, sorry. Another common one when we are using text file is input output error. Let's say you are trying to open a text file which doesn't exist, so you are getting this input output error. Raising an exception is a way for a function to inform its client a problem has occurred that the function itself cannot handle. So for an example, we are going to create a function called get yn that promotes user to enter either letter y or n. If user entered something other than those two letters, the function can simply promote the user to re-enter. So everything is going to work fine. But on the other hand, if you want to write a function that is called is even, which is supposed to be passed a numeric value, but instead you pass a string, right? In that case, it cannot correct the problem. So it will notify the client about the problem, and then it leaves it up to the client to basically determine how to resolve that issue. So you can either let the program to terminate itself and show you like an error message, or you can handle that exception that is raised by program and basically do something about it. And to be clear, the raised exceptions are not required to be handled in Python. Again, if you do not handle raised exceptions, you are going to see the program that is terminated automatically. So let's see an example. Let's say we want to write a function that takes the month number from user. So we are going to create an input function to get the month number from user, and we are storing that information into the variable month. Since it's going to be an integer value, we want to convert that to integer. But let's say by accident user puts something other than an integer value. So there you will get an error message if you do not handle that exception. The other thing that you need to be checking is to making sure that the number is in the range 1 to 12, right? So two different cases that we want to check. But if you enter a number that is not in the range of 1 to 12, that is not an error. That is just invalid input, right? So there's a difference between invalid input and the input that cause an exception to be raised. Okay, again, we want to write a function that takes a number from 1 to 12. So let's just start it. So I'm going to say def, I'm going to call this function month, and it doesn't take any parameters. So I'm going to get my month from my user. So I'm going to say month equal to input. I'm going to say enter a number from 1 to 12, all right? Within. All right, so this is the input that I'm getting from my user, and let's say you want to print it. Okay, so print month, right? So if I run this program, nothing is going to happen. Why? Because I'm not calling the function. I'm defining it, but I'm not calling it. If you want to see something, you need to call that function. So after you call it, then it asks you for an input. If I put, for instance, 2, then you're going to see that value 2. If I say what is the type of month, you're going to see type string, right? Because I'm getting that value through input function, and input function always creates a type string. Okay, so my goal is to also convert that number to an integer, right? So now I'm going to try it again, type 2, and I'm not printing it, so print type month. Then if I run it, it should be type integer, okay, because I'm converting that to integer. So if I run it again, and this time if I put 20, which is not within the range of 1 to 12, it's going to take that value and accept it, all right? I don't want my program to accept that value unless it is between 1 and 12. So I want my program to keep asking user for an input until the input is within 1 to 12, right? So I need to have a loop. I need to have a loop to keep asking user for an input until the number they put is within 1 to 12. Otherwise, again, you should ask user. For that, we need a loop. And the only loop that we can use is a while loop, because we don't know how many times user are going to put something incorrect. All right, so I'm going to set my while loop, and I'm going to say while, and I need a condition here. All right, there are many ways that you can set this while loop. One way is I'm going to create this variable valid. I'm going to set it to false, and I'm going to say if not valid, okay, if it's not valid input, just get an input from user. Just keep getting that input from user until it is something that is valid. All right, so now if I run it, it's going to be an infinite loop. Right, so it's just going to keep asking me regardless of what value I put in there, because I didn't check for that condition. I'm not checking to make sure the number is within 1 to 12. All right, for that I can simply say if month is bigger than 1 and month is less than equal to 12, bigger or equal to 1, then I'm going to check my valid to true. All right, so if I do that, then it is not an infinite loop, because I'm changing the condition that I have. All right, as soon as the month is within 1 and 12, then you're going to see that valid is going to turn to true. This condition is not true anymore, and it ends the loop. All right, so this time if I try it, if I put something big, it's going to keep asking me for an input, but as soon as I put something that is within 1 to 12, is going to stop and is going to print the value for me. Okay, so far everything is fine, because I'm assuming user input is an integer value. So what happens if user puts something that is not an integer? Okay, I'm going to run it one more time, and this time I'm going to put J or G, sorry. This time I'm going to get this value error because you cannot convert G to an integer value because it is not a numeric string. So it is not possible to convert that to an integer. For cases like that in which you are not sure what the user is going to input, the best thing that you can use is the try and except block. That is a way that you can handle the exception. The exception in this example, for instance, was value errors. An exception was raised in this case, and we want to handle that exception. The way to do it is by using try and except block. Okay, so what happens with try and except is the part of the code that you're not sure if it could raise exception or not, you're going to put it in the try block. Okay, so this part, I'm not sure if this month is going to be convertible to an integer value. So for that part, I'm going to put it in the try block. All right, if you have more stuff, you can put them here. That's okay, because if there's any error that happens here, it's going to jump into the except part. All right, so if any of the line of code that you have inside try raise an exception, you are going to stop right there, and then you're going to move to the except part. So here I can say print and just show this one input, or I can say invalid input. All right, and or invalid input must be integer, and then here I can say else, because this part is when the number is when the number was an integer, it was a numeric string. You were able to convert that to integer. If it is within 1 to 12, you change your valid. If it's not within 1 and 12, you can print this message. Invalid input must be within 1 to 12. Okay, so you see two different types of message that you're showing to the user. If the user input is not convertible to integer, then you jump into this part. You show invalid input must be an integer. If the number is a numeric string, you can change it, you can convert it to integer, then it checks it to make sure it is within 1 to 12. If it is, good. If it's not, it's going to show you this message. So now let's try it. So if I put, for instance, 50, it's going to say invalid input must be within 1 to 12. If I put, for instance, J, is going to say invalid input must be an integer. You see, it shows different messages, and in this case, it didn't show this error message. It gracefully sort of now trying to handle it gracefully and showing me the proper message so I know what I did incorrectly. So to recap, with try and except, you can handle the raise exception. Whatever you put inside the try block is going to be like a sequential programming. You're going to Python go through each of these lines, execute them. If there is no problem, fine, you go to the next line, go to the next line, no, next line. If there's no problem whatsoever, you skip the except part, right? So you're not even going to go there. But if there is any exception that is raised inside your try block, you're going to stop right in that line and jump into the except and continue with the except part of your program.